We start the 8th lesson of the Dream House today with the beginning of the third part of the novel. Part 3 consists of 18 separate sections or points of view. This can make remembering the sequence of events quite tricky. A tip from the McRath Study Manual is to work out your own system of section titles. They suggest using song titles or clever alliterative phrases. Whatever works for you, it is good advice. We are going to jump straight into part 3 with Patricia. Please turn to page 99 in your novel. The McRath Study Guide has given this section the title, "It's Raining, It's Pouring, Look Smart is Arriving," which might be a bit flippant given the increasing tension in the novel. On a rainy night, Patricia is sitting alone at home when a servant rattles the door. She's called to the servants' quarters where a mother is in labor. Patricia has been at several births, more animal ones though. The mother is writhing in pain and is concerned that something is wrong. But Patricia talks her through the birth and helps her to cope with the pain. The baby, a boy, is robust, and Patricia observes that he is a strong little chap. His mother names him Look Smart, and Patricia observes that it was a good night to be born, as the rains have washed away and cleansed everything. It seems as if nothing wicked would ever be left in the world. The baby becomes an important escape for Patricia. On the next slide, you can listen to Dr. Marlene Zwichers read this section to you.
Patricia, page 99 to 102. It was a wet night, like this. She was sitting alone in a chair, staring at the television, when there was a rattle at the front door. She thought it was the wind, but when she went there, she found one of the workers. He said the baby was on its way. She should come. She didn't know where Richard was. He was probably out with the latest stable girl from England, in a pub deep in the hills, sitting by a fire, their knees touching under the table, while they talked about England and all the things they missed. The weather, greasy spoons, public transport, unemployment, Margaret Thatcher. The truth was that she gave neither Richard nor England any thought as she put on her coat and left the house. The wind was huge in the bloodwoods, and the rain was soon stinging their faces. But she, flanked by the dogs, followed the man down to the compound, her feet finding their way in the darkness. She had attended many births, mainly horses, cattle, and sheep. She had even been present, to some extent, at the birth of Rachel. But each time the characters and the story that unfolded between them was different. Every mother was different and went through so many different states that it was impossible by the end to say much about the birth that felt sufficient. It was a good birth, a bad birth. These hardly went anywhere in describing it. What never differed, however, was the contrast between the mother and all those around her. Everyone was helpless, exhausted, apologetic. But the observers always stood on the periphery, while the mother provided the heart of the storm. The mother sat at the place that couldn't be climbed away from. Yet every mother at a certain point tried to get out of the bed and get away from the birth, the pain of it. Yet every mother was thrown back down and subjected to the event, which had been painful, according to the Bible, since the moment Eve had tasted that apple and brought upon humanity God's hideous curse. The baby came from far away, and the mother was lying on the shore, amongst the broken waves heaved about this and that, and the new life was distant at first. On the other side of the waves, far out to the sea, little more than a boat bobbing, almost beyond sight. And each new wave became a contraction, twisting through the woman's body, pulling the small boat closer. Imunjunjule. That is what Luke Smart's mother said to Patricia when she entered the dimly lit hut. Then she said, in English, "I am pain." Every part of her body looked twisted up like a wet towel. She was struggling to take off her necklace because she couldn't breathe. Not long afterwards, during a contraction, her waters broke and she let out a moan of sorrow. I can't get the baby out. It is stuck." It isn't stuck. Patricia was saying this. The pain is your friend. It is there to help get the baby out. Every mother had to find that moment when they changed their minds about the pain. When it was a thing they no longer tried to escape, but became something they started to use, to work with, riding through it, not stopping at it, using it not as an obstacle, but as a horse. Don't scream. You're wasting energy. Instead, you must push. It took another hour of screaming and not screaming before the baby came out, grey and wet and rubbery, like a big dead fish. But it wasn't dead. Patricia lifted it up and it took its first breath and screamed. And everyone except the mother laughed. The mother was too far away, too emptied out and reduced to a husk. Patricia knew at once that there was nothing weak about this baby. They cut the cord and it screamed again, and they knew it was going to be all right. The baby was wrapped in a bundle and handed to the mother, and immediately he found a nipple and started to suck. Even though her milk hadn't arrived yet, he knew what he was about, what he wanted and where it would come from. He was never going to apologize to anyone. A strong little chap, that's what he will be, Patricia said. "We will call him Look Smart," said his mother. Usually, Patricia would have left. But that night she sat by the bed, waiting, to make sure the mother and child would be all right, and waiting to see if they would be able to sleep. But the mother didn't sleep. Only the baby did. And when he was asleep, holding onto her breast like he had always been there, the mother drank a mug of sweet tea, and Patricia drank one with her. They stared at the tiny sleeping face for so long that all other faces looked impossibly huge, like exaggerated moons. It was a good night to be born. The gentle rain nourishing the earth. The earth's wetness went deep and everything was washed clean. It felt for an hour or two that nothing wicked would ever be left in the world. Every day. After that, Patricia would go down to the hut to look at the child. He would stare deep into her eyes, stare as though he was still that small boat beyond the waves and was still trying to arrive. "Who are you?" she would ask him. "Who are you?" His eyes would answer back. He moved like an underwater creature. His body still carried the memory of the womb. His little hands and feet were suspended as if floating without gravity. She never told Richard about the newborn child. Children had become one of the topics they avoided. But it was more than that. She had found a place where Richard was not, where something altogether outside of him existed. She experienced her visits to the compound much as she would later experience her visits to Rawdon's hotel with John Ford. It was a secret pleasure and an act of defiance. Not so much against Richard as in the opposite direction from him, towards everything Richard was not, towards life.
These rather bleak quotes from this section should stand out for you. The references to and descriptions of Look Smart's birth are not the wondrous and life-affirming versions usually associated with childbirth. The newborn Look Smart is described as a grey, wet, rubbery, big, dead fish. There's that fishing and hook imagery again. Patricia's possessiveness about the infant is noteworthy. Her isolation from her husband has been a choice for years. Richard is a thief. He steals life and joy from Patricia. On page 103, we return to Richard's point of view. Richard is still confused, especially when he arrives at his house, only to find it mostly demolished. He sees that the gate and the driveway are missing. He cannot fathom why the house seems so unfamiliar, not realizing that this is the start of a new house styled on his old house. He's tired and has been wandering around the farm for some time now. He sees men, visitors, in the house, and then becomes fearful that they could turn on him and hunt him down. However, once he is in his bedroom, he lowers the brick presumably for protection or defense. Read this section for yourselves. These quotes tie in with the notion of a dream house. For these guests, these men, his judgment is misplaced. They do not have a choice about where and how they live. Beauty's point of view starts again on page 106. The MacRat heading for this section is Tea for Two. Beauty is about to bring through the tea tray and the slightly charred Marie biscuits. There appears to be a confrontation, and her entrance interrupts this. She hears Looksmart, Piwayenkosi, insisting that he is at the farm to talk about the girl he loved, Grace, Beauty's sister. Beauty feels that she is something of a disappointment, but is still vague regarding Richard. She tells Patricia that she's sure that Becky will find Richard. Think about the way that Beauty has been positioned in this chapter. Why does Looksmart insist on using his and her Zulu names? I would like you to pause a moment here and read through this poem by Makgolengwa Selepe. It addresses the apartheid legacy of substituting a person's African name with a generic name like Maria in this poem or Beauty and Looksmart in the novel. It's a poem that should be heard. Please enjoy the spoken word performance on the next slide from the 2016 Poetry for Life finals at the Franschhoek Literary Festival.
My Name by Makgolengwa Selepe. Nomgqibelo ncamisile ngqibisa. Look at what they have done to my name, the wonderful name of my great-great-grandmothers. Nomgqibelo ncamisile ngqibisa. The burly bureaucrat was surprised. What he heard was music to his ears. What is thy, say no fear? I am from Chief Dalutolo Vela Igodle of Emamponweni, and my name is Nomgqibelo Ncamisile Ngqibisa. Messiah, help me. My name is so simple yet so meaningful, but to this man it is trash. He gives me a name convenient enough to answer his whim. I end up being Mariah. I, Nomgqibelo Ncamisile Ngqibisa.
In Looksmart's next section, we are faced with his memory of Grace's awful, awful death. Patricia cautions Looksmart. She senses that he is steadily walking towards something that could be catastrophic. We are not sure if her caution is an act of self-preservation or a protective impulse towards him. He urges her to remember when Grace ran towards the house screaming, her clothing in tatters. In his mind, Grace was going to ask for a few days off so that she could get married. In Patricia's mind, she heard an inhuman scream and sent Looksmart to investigate. He then relives that fateful day. Grace being attacked by the dog, the workers watching her, being mauled. As you read this section yourself, think about the following questions. What is the effect and the purpose of starting this section with a commentary on the nature of words? What has happened to Looksmart since he left the farm? And how do we know that Looksmart has kept that moment of horror fresh in his mind? The first quotation has something inhuman in the description. Richard is portrayed as someone or something of little or no substance. The reference to words, to language, in the second quotation is significant. Looksmart feels manipulated by words. After reading the poem My Name, you should have a clearer understanding of the author's intention here. Looksmart has come to Dwaleni on a mission. The third quotation sounds very ominous. Do you think it's realistic? Patricia's response to Looksmart's memory of Grace's death is callous. She doesn't react in the way that she should. Surely she should have been outraged. Is Looksmart correct? Why does Patricia's reaction upset him so? Focus on the word small in the fifth quote. Is this a small fact on which Looksmart builds his hatred? The description of the dogs is ambiguous. Here, the dogs are Patricia and Richard. They could also symbolize white South Africans from the apartheid era. They are attack dogs. It is shocking that no one moved to help Grace. No one moves to save her because no one can. This was the position of black laborers in apartheid South Africa. Powerless. Looksmart's visceral reaction to the memory should make us, the readers, uncomfortable, while building our sympathy for him. He is a deeply traumatized man. It is Looksmart who is howling. He still feels the pain as he recalls the horror of Grace's death. Let's turn back to Patricia. Her recollection of events is different from Looksmart's. In fact, she doesn't even remember that he was there. She remembers being annoyed with Grace and somehow holding Grace responsible for provoking the dog and for running away, thus aggravating the situation. Patricia was the one who pulled Chloe, the dog, off Grace and locked the dog away, demanding that it be shot. Richard protested, insisting that the dog was only doing her job and feeling that the attack was in some way a warning to other workers to behave or else. The dog is later found dead, poisoned. Follow in your novel as you listen to Dr. Zwichers read Patricia's section.
Patricia, page 113. It is not, of course, a scene she is likely to forget. But whenever she has thought about it, she has never recalled Looksmart being there. He is not a part of the picture, not as she recollects it. In her head, he was gone by then, and she was alone and had to deal with the whole sorry affair herself. What she can recall is her irritation with the girl. The dog would never have bitten her had she not provoked it. Well, isn't that what Richard said? And when it finally pulled itself free, instead of remaining where she was and talking the dog down, she turned and ran off screaming. So what else could the dog do but attack? She also remembers how useless the other workers were, standing around like men turned to stone, waiting as usual for the madam to step in and help. Why wouldn't Looksmart admit that it was she, Patricia, who stepped in and got the dog off the girl? She grabbed it by the collar and dragged it all the way into the house, half throttling it, the pink foam swaying from its lips. Its eyes white and wild, its its tongue scarlet with the intermingled blood. She locked the dog in the guest loo, and when she returned later, there was blood all over the white tiles, as if someone had cut their wrists in there, had second thoughts, and tried in vain to get out. Patricia would have shot that dog if Richard hadn't stopped her. Why, she was only doing a job, he told her. You think they'll ever mess with her again after that? But they did mess with her after that. One day, they found Chloe lying dead at the end of her chain. Poisoned, according to the vet. And that, as far as she was concerned, was the last of it. Well, what was that girl to you? She asks him. She has already understood the answer to this. But she wants him to speak. Even his words, which hurt her like a succession of knives, would be better than this rootless sobbing, wandering about, trying to find a place to settle. The man she wanted to marry, she says. It was you, wasn't it?
Patricia comes across as callous. The victim, Grace, is not seen as human here, but as prey for the predator, the dog. From Patricia's point of view, the workers were useless. But it's not a uselessness, it's a helplessness. Patricia sees herself as some kind of savior, educating Look Smart, saving Grace. She represents so many white South Africans who did not do anything to challenge the status quo of the apartheid years. They only stepped in when it was not too inconvenient for them. On page 115, we have one of only 4 times that we read Becky's point of view. Becky notices the sharp drops of rain and, in the distance, on the veranda, sees a man gulping in the night air. It's time to consolidate your work on this section of the novel. Those of you with the English Experience Study Guide, please read pages 90 to 96 and then answer the 6 questions from page 97. As always, I have put the questions on the slides that follow. Pause the video as you answer each question. Questions 1 and 2 refer to 2 births, Rachel's and Look Smart's. Richard's dementia and his conscience have sentenced him to a life not worth living. Question 4 references language and the power of language to manipulate human relationships. Question 5 and question 6 both refer to an interpretation of Richard. Complete your answers before you move on to the next slides. Childbirth is painful, but I don't think that this is the only reason for Patricia not being entirely present at the birth of her daughter Rachel. Having a child with Richard would tie her to him more firmly. Divorce, separation, it's much more difficult when there are children involved. The wily marriage is held together by fragile threads. Patricia is a deeply unhappy wife. Her involvement with Looksmart, from his birth to his education, gave her a purpose, something that existed outside the fractured relationship she has with Richard. It is something that she does not want tainted by her husband. Richard is dead, not as in a coffin, but as a person. His dementia is robbing him of a lucid memory. He no longer feels as though he has a role to play in this performance that is his life. Living or dead, there is now not much difference to Richard. Beauty is used to the regular arguments between Richard and Patricia. They have become routine, part of the fabric of this strange family. The argument between Patricia and Looksmart is different. It contains real venom, real passion. These are real human emotions on display. Looksmart's description of Richard is disparaging. Richard is inconsequential, a moth drawn to a flame, too weak to withstand the temptation. The quote on page 115 refers to Looksmart. He is the man who is overwhelmed by emotions here. In my research and reading around this novel, I came across a powerful quote by the Oscar award-winning actress Viola Davis. She said, "Memories demand attention because memories have teeth." Much of the dream house is to do with memory and how different characters remember the same incident so very differently. As an exercise, think of something that happened to you more than 5 years ago. Write down in as much detail as you can your memory of that event. And then ask people who were there how they remember that same event. You'll be stunned at the differences. Viola Davis recounts memories of her sister who was sexually abused when she was a young girl. Viola Davis is of the opinion that the unresolved memories of the abuse were instrumental in her sister's poor choices as an adult and her descent into substance abuse. Find this article on the internet and read it. Better yet, find a video clip of Viola Davis delivering this powerful speech and consider its links to this novel. While you're researching, I recommend that you pay a visit to this blog, written by another IEB English teacher. Update your notes, add themes, and start with memory. Thank you for your time. You can find me on various platforms. Look for Mrs. M Teaches English. Until the next lesson, goodbye.